There are mysteries that sit quietly inside us, so close and so intimate that we almost forget how extraordinary they are. We can map galaxies that are billions of light years away. We can split atoms. We can send machines beyond the edge of our solar system. And yet, the greatest mystery of all lives, not out there, but right here inside the human mind. What is consciousness? That gentle but powerful awareness that whispers, "I exist." That invisible presence that turns raw sensory signals into a world full of color, sound, memory, and meaning. The very thing that allows you, right now, to hear these words and feel something inside. Science can measure brain activity, scan neurons firing, trace signals moving through cells like electric storms across a dark sky. But it cannot explain why all of this gives rise to the simple yet profound experience of being alive. Some scientists believe consciousness is nothing more than a product of the brain, an evolutionary trick, a complex illusion created by billions of neurons communicating. But others look deeper, beyond the biology, beyond the chemistry, and they ask, what if consciousness is not just inside us, but everywhere? What if it is not a byproduct of matter, but a fundamental ingredient of the universe itself, as basic as space and time? And then comes the most daring idea. What if consciousness is tied to the strange, almost magical world of quantum mechanics? The same mysterious realm that allows particles to exist in two places at once, that lets them communicate instantly across vast distances, that defies our logic and reshapes our understanding of reality. Could it be that the thing that makes you you, the essence of your awareness, is not only in your head but connected to the very fabric of the cosmos? This is not just science. It is not just philosophy. It is the deepest question we can ask. Are we merely brains trapped in fragile bodies, or are we sparks of something infinite, woven into the universe itself? And tonight, we journey together into this mystery where science meets wonder, where physics touches the soul, and where the search for truth may change the way you see yourself forever. Before we step into this extraordinary journey, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Each documentary we create is a step into the unknown, into the questions that shape humanity's greatest search for meaning. By subscribing, you join us on this path of discovery, helping us bring more mysteries to light. And together, we explore the universe within and beyond. Welcome to our documentary, where we unravel one of the most profound enigmas in human history. The mystery of consciousness. Is it born from the firing of neurons inside the brain? Is it a hidden quantum effect that science is only beginning to glimpse? Or is it something even greater, a universal force that connects us all? In this film, we will travel across the landscapes of science, philosophy, history, and imagination. We will listen to the voices of great thinkers, explore the cutting edge of physics, and face questions that have no easy answers. This is not just a story about the brain. It is a story about you, consciousness. A word so familiar, and yet so deeply mysterious. It is the quiet presence behind every heartbeat, every breath, every fleeting thought that passes through the mind. To be conscious is to know that you exist. It is that inner flame that tells you, I am here, I am alive. Without it, the world around you might still exist, but it would mean nothing. The trees would stand tall, the oceans would crash upon the shore, the stars would shine, but without consciousness, there would be no one to notice, no one to feel wonder. Awareness is not just a scientific problem. It is personal, the most intimate thing you can ever know. You are not just a collection of cells, not just a body made of atoms, not just the sum of chemical reactions inside a brain. You are something more. You are the witness to it all. You are the one who feels joy when you see the smile of a loved one, the one who aches with grief when someone you care about is gone, the one who stands in awe when looking at the endless sky. And 8. Despite being so close to us, closer than anything else in our lives, consciousness remains the greatest riddle. Science has explained so much. It has shown us how planets move around the sun, how stars are born and die, how life evolves on Earth, how the smallest particles dance in a quantum haze. But when it comes to this one simple yet profound question, why are we aware? Science falls silent. Try to think of it this way. The brain is a physical object. It is made of billions of neurons, tiny nerve cells that send signals to one another using electricity and chemistry. Each neuron is like a switch, firing or staying silent, passing information to its neighbors. Scientists can watch this happen. They can scan brains and see activity glowing like constellations in the night. They can tell which part of the brain lights up when you see red, when you hear music, when you remember your childhood. And yet, no matter how closely they look, they cannot find you. They cannot find the feeling of redness, the music that brings tears, the memories that make you who you are. They can measure brain signals, but they cannot explain how those signals transform into the experience of being alive. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. You see your reflection. You know it is you. But what is the thing that recognizes itself? What is the invisible presence that says, "That is me"? That presence, that spark, is consciousness, and though you live with it every second, it remains unexplainable. Some scientists believe that consciousness is an illusion, that it is simply the brain tricking itself into thinking it is aware. According to this view, you are just a machine and organic computer running a very complicated program. Your feelings, sense of self, are nothing more than patterns of electrical activity. But if that were true, how would you even know you are alive? How could an illusion be aware of itself? An illusion cannot feel joy, cannot feel pain, cannot cry out, "I exist." Yet you do. This is why philosophers call consciousness the hard problem. It is not enough to explain how the brain processes information. Computers can process information too. They can recognize faces, solve puzzles, and even play music. But no matter how advanced they are, there is no sign that they feel. There is no inner world inside a machine. But inside you, there is a world so vast and rich it cannot be measured. Think of a sunrise. The colors bleed across the sky shades of pink, gold, and orange. You do not just see light waves. You feel beauty. Or think of a song that moves you to tears. Your ears detect sound waves. Your brain interprets them, but why does it hurt so sweetly inside? Why does it mean something? Science can map the signals, but it cannot explain the meaning. That is the heart of the mystery. Consciousness is not just about information, it is about experience. And experience is something no microscope, no scanner, no computer model has ever captured. Perhaps this is why ancient thinkers believed consciousness was something sacred. For them, it was not just a side effect of the body. It was the essence of the soul. It was what connected human beings to the universe. Even today, many spiritual traditions teach that awareness is not inside the brain, but part of something far greater. Whether you believe in science or in spirit, one truth remains. We do not yet know where consciousness comes from. There is also something deeply emotional about this question, because to ask, "What is consciousness?" is to ask, "What am I? Am I just a fragile body, destined to fade away? Or am I something that cannot be touched by death? Is the awareness that speaks inside me just a flicker in the darkness, or is it a spark of eternity?" These questions are not just scientific or human. They touch the very core of our being. Every time you dream, every time you imagine, every time you fall in love or grieve a loss, you are living inside this mystery. And that mystery is both beautiful and terrifying. Because if we cannot explain why we are conscious, then we cannot fully explain who we are. Science struggles because it is built on observation and measurement, but consciousness is not something you can place on a scale or view under a microscope. It is not a physical object that can be weighed. It is an experience, and experiences are invisible to everyone except the one who feels them. You cannot look inside my head and know what it is like to be me, just as I cannot know what it is like to be you. That invisible gap, the private nature of awareness, is what makes it so difficult to study. Yet, this same mystery is what makes us human. It is what allows us to write poetry, to create art, imagine worlds beyond our reach. A rock does not wonder about its own existence. A tree does not ask why it is alive. But you do, and that wonder is the seed of consciousness. Scientists continue to study, and they have made great progress in understanding how the brain works. But the more they learn, the deeper the mystery becomes. Each discovery about neurons and networks only raises new questions. The puzzle is not shrinking. It is growing. Some even suggest that we may never solve it, that consciousness is beyond the reach of science. But others believe we are only at the beginning of understanding, and that one day we may uncover truths that will change everything we think we know about life, mind, and the universe itself. For now, the mystery remains. Consciousness is both the most familiar thing we know and the most profound enigma we face. It is the silent witness inside us all, shaping every thought, every feeling, every dream. And whether it is born from the brain or from the universe itself, one thing is certain. Without it, there would be no world at all. Because without consciousness, there is no one to wonder, no one to question, no one to love, and no one to dream. And so, we ask again and again, what does it mean to be aware? And why, after all our knowledge and all our science, can we still not explain it? Perhaps the answer lies not just in the neurons of the brain, but in the very fabric of reality. Perhaps the mystery of consciousness is the doorway to something even greater. The human brain has been called the most complex object in the known universe. Inside your skull, a silent storm is unfolding every moment of your life. It is made of around 86 billion neurons, tiny nerve cells that are so small you could fit thousands of them on the head of a pin. Each neuron is alive, pulsing with electricity, carrying signals in bursts that last just milliseconds. And yet, when billions of them work together, they create the music of thought, memory, and imagination. If you could travel inside the brain, it would look like a glowing city at night. Highways of fibers stretch across vast distances, carrying pulses of light. Each neuron reaches out with tiny branches called dendrites, forming connections with thousands of neighbors. Those connections are called synapses. They are like bridges between cells, places where one neuron whispers to another with a chemical spark. And in the endless chatter of these cells, your entire life unfolds. Every time you see something, neurons in the back of your brain light up. Every time you hear a sound, a different region hums with activity. When you smell bread baking, when you feel the warmth of the sun, when you recall the face of someone you love, it is neurons firing and connecting in patterns so complex that even the most advanced computers cannot yet replicate them. Scientists often compare the brain to a machine. It takes in information from the world, processes it, stores it, and reacts. Like a computer, it receives input and generates output. A neuron fires, another responds, and in the cascade of signals, your actions are born. In this view, your brain is nothing more than a biological computer, an astonishingly advanced machine built, not of silicon and wires, but of living cells. And there is beauty in this explanation. It shows us how fragile, yet powerful the brain is. It reveals the mechanics of memory, how learning changes the very shape of your brain by strengthening some connections and weakening others. It explains why emotions surge when chemicals like dopamine or serotonin are released. It even shows us why injuries or illnesses can change personality, how damage in one region of the brain can erase language, or memory, or sight. But even with all this knowledge, something is missing. Because no matter how closely you study neurons, no matter how precisely you measure synapses, you cannot explain the inner life that arises from them. Think about it this way. If you watch a computer, you can track the flow of electricity through circuits. You can see how input is turned into output, but you will never find a flicker of awareness inside that machine. It does not feel. It does not know. It does not sit in wonder, asking why it exists. It simply runs its program. So what makes the brain different? Why does this biological machine, made of cells and chemicals, give rise to consciousness? This is where the materialist view begins to fall short. Materialism, in philosophy, is the belief that everything, including the mind, can be explained by matter and physical processes alone. It says you are nothing more than the sum of your neurons, that your thoughts and feelings are illusions created by chemical reactions. But if that were true, why do you feel alive? Why do you suffer when you are hurt, or glow with joy when you fall in love? Why do you hear music not just as sound waves, but as beauty? Why do you see colors not just as wavelengths, but as wonder? A purely mechanical explanation leaves out the essence of being humenda, experience itself. Science can describe the mechanics of the brain. It can show which neurons fire when you see red, but it cannot tell you why red feels warm, vibrant, alive. It can trace the pathways of sound, but it cannot explain why a certain melody can move you to tears. It can map the circuits of fear, but it cannot explain why terror feels so heavy in the chest. That invisible leap from physical process to inner experience is what remains unexplained. Materialism struggles with what philosophers call qualità, raw feel of experience. What it is like to taste sweetness, to feel sadness, to hold love in your heart. These things are real, undeniable, and yet they cannot be captured by studying neurons alone. If we reduce the brain to just a machine, we risk stripping away the very thing that makes us human. A machine may calculate, but it does not dream. A machine may store information, but it does not imagine. A machine may respond to input, but it does not write poetry or fall in love. Ask who it is. You? Do? And perhaps the greatest weakness of the machine model is this. Machines are predictable. Give a computer the same input, and it will always produce the same output. But humans are not like that. You can face the same situation twice and respond in entirely different ways. You can act with logic one moment and with emotion the next. You can surprise yourself. Somewhere in the space between neurons and choices, there is freedom. There is unpredictability. There is you. Neuroscience has shown us so much about the brain, but it has also revealed how fragile and mysterious it is. A single blow to the head can change who you are. A tiny chemical imbalance can alter your moods, your desires, your very sense of reality. If we are machines, then we are machines so delicate, so endlessly complex, that they defy comparison to anything we have ever built. And still, the question remains unanswered. Does the brain produce consciousness like a machine produces output? Or is the brain more like a receiver, tuning into something deeper, something that already exists beyond the cells and signals? Those who defend the machine view argue that one day we will solve the puzzle. They believe that as technology improves, as we build more advanced models of the brain, we will eventually unlock the code of consciousness. To them, the mystery is only temporary. It is just a matter of time, but others are not so sure. They point out that the gap between physical processes and subjective experience is not shrinking. It is growing. With every discovery about neurons, we realize more clearly what is missing. And perhaps the answer is not within the brain alone. Perhaps the brain is only part of the story. To call the brain a machine is to admire its power, but it may also be to underestimate its mystery. A machine cannot fall in love. A machine cannot create meaning. A machine cannot feel the weight of time, or the fear of death, or the hope for eternity. But you can. And so, even as science uncovers the machinery of the brain, the flame of consciousness remains beyond its reach. Maybe, one day, we will discover that the brain is not the source of consciousness, but its instrument. Maybe the firing of neurons is not the whole story, but only the beginning of something much deeper. Maybe your awareness is not locked inside your skull, but connected to the universe itself. For now, the brain remains both machine and mystery. It is the seat of thought and memory, the engine of every dream you have ever had. But it is also the veil behind which the greatest question of all still waits. Why does this machine produce a self? Why, in the glow of its neurons, is there an Aya being who feels, wonders, and longs for more? And that question leads us beyond biology, beyond materialism, into the strange and shimmering world of deeper theories. The brain may be a machine, but perhaps consciousness is something greater than any machine could ever explain. For centuries, human beings have tried to explain the mystery of the mind. We have learned much about the body, about the stars, about the very fabric of the universe. But when it comes to the question of awareness, of consciousness, we find ourselves standing before a wall of mystery that refuses to break. And it was the philosopher David Chalmers who gave this mystery its most famous name, the hard problem of consciousness. Chalmers explained something that seems simple, yet is deeply unsettling. There are, he said, two kinds of problems when it comes to the mind, the easy problems and the hard problem. The easy problems are not truly easy, but they are things science knows how to approach. How does the brain process information? How do neurons fire to produce speech, memory, or movement? How do signals travel from the eyes to the brain to create vision? These are complicated questions, but they belong to the realm of science. With enough study, enough technology, we can uncover the answers. These are the easy problems. But then comes the hard problem. And it is this why is all that processing accompanied by an inner experience? Why does the firing of neurons produce the feeling of being alive? Why do you not simply act, but also know that you are acting? Why do you not simply hear sound, but also feel the beauty of music? Why do you not simply process light, but also see the radiance of color? This is the puzzle. Science can explain how the body reacts. It can tell you what happens when light hits your eyes, how the signal moves through the brain, which neurons light up when you see red. But none of this explains why red feels the way it does. None of this explains why you do not live in silence, in darkness, in emptiness. None of this explains the inner movie playing in your mind, the taste of coffee, the warmth of love, the ache of grief. Chalmers pointed out that knowing how the brain works is not the same as knowing why consciousness exists. Imagine you are looking at a piano. You can learn how pressing the keys produces sound, how the strings vibrate, how the hammers strike. You can understand every mechanical detail, but none of that explains why music moves the heart. In the same way, studying neurons explains the mechanics of thought, but not the mystery of awareness. This is the hard problem. It is not about what the brain does. It is about what the brain creates inside the inner world, the subjective experience, the soul of existence. And no matter how advanced our science becomes, this mystery still stands untouched. Think of a sunset. Science can tell you about light waves, about the scattering of photons, about the physics of the atmosphere that paints the sky red and gold. It can even measure the brain signals as your eyes take in the sight. But why does that sight feel beautiful? Why does it touch you in ways words cannot capture? Science can explain the mechanics, but not the meaning. Or think of pain. A doctor can explain how nerves send signals when you are hurt, how chemicals flood the brain, how muscles react. But why does pain hurt? Why is there a subjective feeling of suffering, not just a mechanical response? The hard problem lives in that space, between the mechanics of the body and the mystery of the mind. David Chalmers used this distinction to challenge the materialist view, the belief that the brain is just a machine and consciousness is only a byproduct. He argued that, even if we understood every single detail about the brain, every neuron, every connection, every signal, we would still not understand why there is a first-person experience at all. We, tere, izanai. Why, there is a voice inside saying, I exist. And this is where emotion seeps into the heart of the debate. Because this is not just about science. It is about USA. If consciousness cannot be reduced to matter, then perhaps we are not only physical beings. Perhaps awareness is not an illusion, but something fundamental, something woven into the fabric of reality. The hard problem touches everyone, even if they do not realize it. Every time you fall in love, you are inside the hard problem. Every time you dream, every time you suffer, every time you look at the stars and feel a sense of awe, you are standing before the question of consciousness. Why does this inner life exist at all? Why is there something rather than nothing? Science has made attempts to answer. Some argue that consciousness is simply the brain processing information in complex ways. Others suggest it is an evolutionary advantage, helping us survive. But these are answers to the how, not the why. They tell us why consciousness might be useful, but not why it exists. They explain why it helps us adapt, but not why it feels the way it does. To see the difference, imagine a robot programmed to detect danger. It processes information, avoids threats, and survives. But does it feel fear, or is it just running code? For humans, fear is more than a reaction. It is a crushing weight in the chest, a trembling in the bones, a shadow across the soul. That raw feeling cannot be explained by mechanics alone. This is why the hard problem is so unsettling. It reveals the limits of science. We can build machines that mimic behavior, but we cannot explain the soul of experience. We can describe the brain in dazzling detail, but we cannot capture the living presence behind your eyes. Some scientists reject the hard problem altogether. They say it is not real, that consciousness will one day be explained like everything else. But Chalmers argued that this hope is misguided, because the gap is not temporary, it is fundamental. The hard problem is not a lack of knowledge, it is a lack of explanation. It is a crack in our understanding of reality itself. And this is where philosophy and science meet, because if consciousness cannot be explained by physical processes alone, then perhaps it points to something deeper. Perhaps awareness is not an illusion, but a fundamental feature of the universe. Just as gravity pulls objects together, just as time flows forward, perhaps consciousness simply exists, woven into the fabric of reality. The hard problem asks us to look inward, to face the fact that our very existence is unexplained. It humbles us, reminding us that for all our knowledge, we are still children standing at the edge of a vast mystery. And it invites us to wonder if the truth about consciousness lies not in reduction, but in expansion, not in shrinking awareness into biology, but in seeing it as something greater, something universal. When you lie awake at night, listening to your thoughts drift, you are living in the heart of this problem. When you dream, when you imagine, when you remember a moment from long ago and feel it alive inside you, you are touching the mystery. Science can describe the mechanics of sleep, of memory, of imagination, but it cannot capture the living flame of those moments. That flame is consciousness, and it remains beyond reach. David Chalmers gave language to something we all feel, but cannot explain. He reminded us that the true mystery of life is not out in the stars, but inside our own minds. And perhaps that is why the hard problem stirs such deep emotion, because in seeking to understand consciousness, we are really seeking to understand ourselves. To know how is useful. To know why is profound. Science has given us the how, the neurons, the synapses, the signals. But the why, the reason, there is an inner world that all still waits in silence. And in that silence, the question grows louder. What is this awareness? What is this flame? Why do we feel alive, when by all accounts, we should only act? Why do we have a soul of experience, when machines of matter should only be empty? The hard problem does not only challenge science, it challenges our very sense of reality. It asks us to imagine that perhaps consciousness is not an accident, not an illusion, but something fundamental. And if that is true, then every thought you have, every dream you live, every moment of awareness is a glimpse into the deepest truth of the universe. Consciousness has always been one of the most mysterious aspects of human existence. We can measure the brain, track its activity, and even predict certain patterns of thought. Yet, no matter how much science is advanced, the inner feeling of being aware, the sense of I exist, I am here, I experience, remains a mystery. Some scientists believe that consciousness is not just the product of chemical reactions in the brain. Instead, they suggest that its roots may go even deeper, into the very fabric of the universe itself. This is where the theory of quantum consciousness comes in, an idea that connects the strange world of quantum mechanics with the mystery of the mind. To understand this theory, we first need to step into the strange and often confusing world of quantum mechanics. At its core, quantum mechanics studies the behavior of the smallest particles in existence: electrons, photons, and atoms. These particles do not follow the ordinary rules of reality. They can exist in more than one place at the same time. They can disappear and reappear. They can be instantly connected to other particles far away, as if distance means nothing at all. This is not just science fiction. These are real, proven phenomena that have been tested in laboratories again and again. Quantum mechanics is not only real, it is the foundation of our modern technologies like computers, lasers, and even the device you are using to listen to these words. But what makes quantum mechanics so unusual is the role of observation. In the quantum world, particles exist in multiple states, at once a cloud of possibilities. But the moment you measure them, or simply observe them, they collapse into a single outcome. This strange rule is known as the observer effect. It is as if reality waits for consciousness to look at it before it decides what it will become. This mystery has troubled physicists for decades. Does the act of observation really mean consciousness is somehow tied to the laws of physics? Could our awareness and the quantum world be deeply connected? It is here that the Penrose-Hameroff theory, often called ORC-OR, short for orchestrated objective reduction, steps in. proposed by physicists Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. This theory suggests that consciousness may arise from quantum processes inside the brain. Instead of seeing the brain as just a biological machine of neurons and chemical signals, they believe the brain is also a quantum machine. According to them, the structures inside brain cells, called microtubules, might be the stage where quantum events take place. These tiny frameworks are not just ordinary support structures. They could be the hidden network that allows quantum states to form, collapse, and generate the spark of consciousness. To understand why this is so bold, let us look at what most scientists believe. The traditional view is that the brain is simply a network of neurons. These neurons communicate with each other through synapses, firing electrical signals. The combined activity of billions of neurons working together creates our thoughts, feelings, and awareness. In this view, consciousness is nothing magical. It is just the result of computation inside a biological computer. But Penrose and Hameroff argue that this explanation misses something crucial. If consciousness were only computation, then machines should already be conscious. Yet no matter how advanced our computers become, they do not feel, they do not suffer, and they do not love. They calculate, but they do not experience. Penrose, a mathematician and physicist, had already been questioning whether computation alone could ever create true awareness. He believed that something non-computational was missing. Quantum mechanics, with its strange rules and its deep connection to the act of observation, seemed like the missing piece. Stuart Hameroff, on the other hand, was fascinated by microtubules inside neurons. He noticed that these tiny structures seemed almost perfectly suited to hosting quantum processes. Together, they proposed the OR theory, where quantum events happening inside microtubules orchestrate themselves into patterns that we experience as consciousness. Imagine this for a moment. At every second, countless quantum processes are happening in your brain. They are forming clouds of possibilities, collapsing into realities, and weaving themselves together into the story you call your mind. Your thoughts, your emotions, your memories. Each one could be the product of an invisible dance of particles, guided not just by biology, but by the most fundamental laws of the universe. In this view, you are not simply a biological creature. You are a quantum being, connected to the universe in ways far deeper than you can imagine. Of course, this theory is controversial. Many scientists argue that the brain is too warm and noisy for delicate quantum states to survive. Quantum coherence, the fragile state where particles exist in multiple possibilities, usually requires extreme conditions, like near absolute zero temperatures. How could the brain, a biological organ full of heat and chemical chaos, sustain quantum processes? To this, Hameroff and Penrose respond with the idea that microtubules are structured in such a way that they protect quantum states, allowing them to last long enough to matter. They point to evidence from anesthesia, showing that when microtubules are disrupted, consciousness fades. This, they argue, supports the idea that microtubules are not just structural, they are essential to awareness itself. If the OR theory is correct, the implications are staggering. It would mean that consciousness is not just an accident of evolution, but a fundamental property of the universe. It would suggest that our awareness is woven into the fabric of reality, arising whenever quantum processes organize themselves in the right way. This could even explain why consciousness feels so mysterious, because it is not limited to the biological world, but is instead tied to the quantum laws that govern all existence. Think about what this could mean. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes, then perhaps it is not unique to humans at all. Maybe animals, plants, or even other forms of matter carry seeds of awareness, waiting to be discovered. It could also mean that death is not the end of consciousness. If our awareness is tied to quantum events, then perhaps it is possible that some part of us continues in ways we cannot yet understand. The boundaries between mind and universe, between self and cosmos, might be far thinner than we believe. This idea also touches on one of the oldest philosophical questions. Are we separate from the universe, or are we the universe becoming aware of itself? If OR is true, then consciousness may not be something created inside our skulls. Instead, it could be a window through which the universe looks at itself. You are not just a mind trapped in a body. You are the cosmos, experiencing itself through a fragile human form. Of course, the debate is far from over. Many neuroscientists reject Orkor, calling it speculative and lacking proof. They prefer explanations rooted in biology, computation, and networks. But others argue that we cannot ignore the mysteries that classical science cannot explain. Why does the collapse of the wave function a process where quantum possibilities become one reality look, so much like the birth of conscious experience? Why does awareness feel so immediate, so raw, so real, in ways no simple computation could reproduce? These questions keep the mystery alive. In the end, the quantum consciousness theory may or may not be correct, but what it offers is a bridge between the cold equations of physics and the warm flame of human experience. It tells us that perhaps our minds are not accidents of evolution, but doors into something deeper. Every thought you have, every feeling of love, every dream you experience may be part of a grand quantum tapestry, woven from the smallest particles of reality. When you close your eyes and feel the presence of your own awareness, you may be touching the quantum heart of the universe. And whether science proves it tomorrow or centuries from now, one truth remains. Consciousness is the most beautiful mystery of all. For centuries, people have looked at consciousness and wondered if it could be something much bigger than the brain. When we talk about awareness, we often think of it as a product of neurons firing, synapses connecting, and brain chemistry shaping our thoughts. But what if this picture is incomplete? What if consciousness is not locked inside our skulls at all? What if awareness is something that pervades the entire universe, woven into the very matter from which stars and galaxies are born? This is the daring idea of panpsychism. The belief that consciousness is not an isolated miracle, but a universal property present in everything around us. At first, panpsychism sounds strange, even unbelievable. How could a rock be conscious? How could a particle of dust or a drop of water have awareness? Surely these things are lifeless, cold, and empty. Yet the defenders of panpsychism do not claim that rocks or dust think in the way humans do. They suggest something subtler, that every piece of matter carries within it a spark of experience, however faint, however minimal. This spark is not the same as human thought, but it is still a kind of presence, a whisper of awareness at the very foundation of reality. When you look at the world through this lens, something changes inside you. Suddenly, the tree outside your window is not just wood and leaves, but a living being with its own shade of awareness. The river that flows through the valley is not only water, obeying gravity, but a current of matter experiencing existence in its own quiet way. Even the smallest atom, spinning endlessly in the depths of reality, is not dead machinery, but a participant in the grand story of consciousness. The universe itself, in this view, becomes alive not metaphorically, but literally. Panpsychism is not a new idea. In fact, it is one of the oldest intuitions of humanity. Ancient philosophies across the world carried this belief in different forms. In India, the Upanishads spoke of Atman, the inner self, as being connected to Brahman, the universal spirit. In Thais, every being carries a drop of the universal soul, and consciousness is not created but discovered within. In Greece, philosophers like Thales and Anaxagoras suggested that the world itself was full of mind, that even the simplest elements had their share of awareness. In many indigenous traditions, the earth, the sky, the rivers, and the mountains are not objects, but living spirits with their own intelligence. To our ancestors, it was natural to see consciousness everywhere. It is only modern science, with its sharp focus on measurement and material explanations, that has taught us to doubt it. And yet, modern thinkers are once again turning back to this ancient vision. Why? Because the problem of consciousness remains unsolved. Neuroscience can map brain activity, but it cannot explain why activity feels like experience. Physics can describe the laws of matter, but it cannot tell us why matter gives rise to awareness at all. If consciousness is so difficult to pin down, perhaps the mistake is assuming it emerges only in complex brains. Perhaps it is simpler and deeper to say that consciousness was always here, present in the fabric of existence itself. The beauty of panpsychism is that it bridges the gap between matter and mind. Instead of imagining a sharp boundary where lifeless atoms suddenly become aware, once they reach a certain complexity, panpsychism suggests a continuum. On the simplest level, Matter may have only the faintest glimmer of awareness. But as matter becomes more complex, forming cells, organs, and eventually, brain's consciousness grows richer, more vivid, more In this way, human consciousness is not an exception, but the flowering of a universal potential that exists everywhere. This idea can change how we see ourselves. If consciousness pervades all matter, then we are not isolated minds trapped inside fragile bodies. We are expressions of a universe that is conscious through and through. When you think, when you dream, when you allow, you are not separate from the cosmos. You are the cosmos reflecting on itself. Your awareness is not only yours, it is the voice of reality, speaking softly through the form of a human being. The boundaries between you and the world begin to blur, and what remains is a deep sense of connection, a realization that you belong to something infinite. Of course, many scientists find panpsychism difficult to accept. They ask, how can we possibly know if matter has experience? How can we test it? What evidence could prove such a claim? These are fair questions, and it is true that panpsychism is not easy to measure. But perhaps that is the point. Consciousness is not like mass or length, something you can weigh or measure with a ruler. It is the inner side of reality, the subjective presence that does not show up on instruments, but is undeniable in direct experience. We know it exists because we feel it in ourselves. Panpsychism extends this feeling outward, suggesting that what we experience within is a reflection of something that exists everywhere. Think for a moment about how this changes our relationship with the world. If everything carries consciousness, even in small degrees, then everything deserves respect. The forest is not just a collection of resources to cut and consume. It is a living system of beings with their own share of awareness. The ocean is not just a mass of water for human use. It is a conscious entity in which countless lives thrive. Even the earth itself becomes a kind of vast organism, a conscious being that supports and sustains us. This is not only a spiritual view, but an ethical one. It asks us to treat the world not as dead matter, but as kin, as family, as part of ourselves. In many ways, panpsychism is a bridge between science and spirituality. It honors the ancient intuition that everything is alive, while also offering a framework that modern philosophers can discuss seriously. Thinkers like Galen Strawson and Philip Goff argue that panpsychism is not fantasy, but a serious solution to the mystery of consciousness. Instead of trying to explain how awareness magically emerges from non-awareness, panpsychism removes the need for magic. Consciousness was never absent. It was always here, from the very beginning of time. When you consider this, even the simplest experiences become profound. The warmth of sunlight on your skin is not just energy transfer. It is a connection between two fields of awareness. The sound of rain falling on the roof is not just noise. It is the voice of the world speaking to you. Even silence is not empty, because in a conscious universe, there is never true absence. There's always presence, always awareness, always a subtle hum of being. This vision also echoes through mystical traditions. In Buddhism, there is the teaching of interdependence, that all things are connected, and that separation is an illusion. In Hinduism, the Tao flows through everything, shaping reality while being inseparable from it. In Christian mysticism, God is not distant, but present in every breath, every leaf, every star. Across cultures, people have felt this truth. Consciousness is not confined to human minds. It is the ground of existence, the ocean in which we are all waves. And so, when we return to our original question, what is consciousness? Panpsychism offers a simple yet breathtaking answer. Consciousness is not something the brain produces, like a machine producing sound. Consciousness is something the brain channels, like a radio receiving signals that were always in the air. Your awareness is not a bubble trapped in your head. It is the universe itself, flowing through you, looking out through your eyes, feeling through your heart. If this is true, then you are never alone. Even in your quietest moments, you are surrounded by an ocean of awareness. Every atom, every star, every living being shares in the great mystery of consciousness. You are a part of it, and it is a part of you. The universe is not. Silent, it is alive, awake, and endlessly aware. And maybe, just maybe, when you close your eyes and feel the gentle hum of your own existence, you are touching The very same consciousness that shines in the stars, moves in the rivers, and lives in the heart of all creation. Science has always advanced by testing bold ideas through experiments. When it comes to consciousness, however, experiments become difficult because we are trying to study something that cannot be touched or weighed, something that lives inside experience itself. Yet, even with this challenge, researchers around the world are attempting to find evidence clues that can help us understand where consciousness comes from and whether it connects to deeper layers of reality. From cutting-edge brain studies to the first attempts at quantum experiments, the search for answers has never been more fascinating or more urgent. The most direct way scientists explore consciousness is by studying the brain. Using advanced tools like fMRI, EEG, and MEG, they can map the electrical and magnetic activity inside the skull. These technologies allow us to watch the brain in real time, to see which areas light up when a person is thinking, dreaming, or feeling an emotion. When someone looks at a picture, or remembers a childhood memory, or even imagines a future that has not yet happened, patterns of neurons fire in specific regions. It is a breathtaking sight, almost like watching the mind paint itself on the canvas of the brain. One of the most striking discoveries is how specific networks seem to correspond to consciousness itself. For example, when people are awake and alert, the brain's default mode network shows strong, coordinated activity. When they lose consciousness, whether through deep sleep, anesthesia, or coma, this network weakens or breaks apart. This suggests that awareness depends on the ability of brain regions to integrate information, to hold a unified picture of reality. Some neuroscientists describe consciousness as the binding of information, the mysterious glue that turns scattered signals into this single story of I. And yet, no matter how precise these maps become, they never fully explain the leap from activity to experience. A scan may show neurons firing when you taste chocolate, but it cannot explain why that taste feels sweet, rich, and delightful. Inside your awareness, this gap, the space between brain activity and the inner feeling of being. This is why researchers are beginning to look beyond traditional tools. If the brain is not just a biological organ but also a quantum system, then new kinds of experiments will be needed to capture its hidden processes. Some of the first hints come from studies on anesthesia. When doctors put patients under anesthesia, consciousness seems to vanish completely. You are no longer aware of yourself or the world around you. But the strange thing is how quickly it returns the moment the drug wears off. This has made scientists wonder, what exactly is anesthesia shutting down? Stuart Hameroff, one of the founders of the quantum consciousness theory, A-R-G-E-E. Best, that anesthetics act directly on microtubulus, tiny structures inside brain cells that may host quantum states. If TC is true, then anesthesia could be one of the strongest experimental clues linking consciousness to quantum mechanics. There are also studies using quantum biology, a new field that looks for quantum effects in living systems. For a long time, scientists believed that quantum processes could not survive in warm, messy environments like the human body. But recent discoveries have challenged this assumption. In plants, for example, quantum coherence has been observed in the process of photosynthesis. In birds, quantum effects seem to guide navigation during migration. If quantum mechanics can shape life in these ways, why not consciousness? The evidence is still emerging, but each new discovery pushes the boundary of what we thought possible. Some researchers are even designing experiments to test whether the brain uses quantum entanglement. Entanglement is the phenomenon where two particles remain connected no matter how far apart they are. If one changes, the other instantly reflects the change, as if space and time do not matter. Imagine if groups of neurons, or even microtubules, inside neurons, were entangled in this way. It would mean the brain could process information in ways no classical computer could ever match. A few teams are exploring how to detect entanglement in biological systems, though the technology to measure it in living brains is still in its infancy. If such evidence were found, it would revolutionize our understanding of the mind. Another fascinating line of research comes from near-death experiences. When people are clinically dead for a short time and then revived, many report vivid experiences, tunnels of light, feelings of peace, encounters with loved ones. For years, these accounts were dismissed as hallucinations, But recent studies have shown that even in the moments when the brain should have no measurable activity, bursts of organized brainwaves can still occur. Could this be evidence of consciousness existing on the edge of death, or even beyond? While the answers remain controversial, the fact that such experiences occur at all challenges the belief that awareness is strictly tied to ordinary brain function. In laboratories around the world, experiments are also being designed to test the role of the observer in quantum mechanics. Since the very beginning, the observer effect has haunted physics. Particles remain in multiple states until observed, and then they collapse into one. The question is, does this require consciousness? Could it be that awareness itself is part of the mechanism that turns possibilities into reality? Some experiments, like the Deladchor's quantum eraser, suggest that choices made in the present can affect outcomes in the past. If consciousness plays a role in such effects, even indirectly, it may force us to rethink the relationship between mind and matter. But how can we design an experiment that isolates consciousness as a variable? Some scientists propose using human subjects in quantum tests, measuring whether their focused attention changes outcomes in subtle ways. For example, does the act of a person watching photons going through slits alter the interference pattern in a way that machines alone do not? Such experiments are difficult to design and even harder to interpret, but they represent the frontier where science dares to ask if the mind itself can be measured in the quantum domain. Beyond the laboratory, technology may soon give us even more tools. Advances in brain-computer interfaces are allowing researchers to record brain activity with unprecedented detail, down to the level of individual neurons. If quantum effects are at work in the brain, these tools may one day detect their signatures. Similarly, the growth of quantum computers, which rely on the same fragile states of superposition and entanglement, might inspire methods to compare artificial quantum systems with the human mind. Could we one day build a machine that mirrors the quantum patterns of consciousness itself? And if we did, would that machine awaken? These questions take us to the edge of both science and philosophy. Evidence alone may never fully solve the mystery of consciousness, because consciousness is not only about what can be observed from the outside, it is also about what is felt on the inside. This is why experiments must be paired with courage. The courage to look at the results and accept that reality may be stranger, deeper, and more alive than we ever imagined. As we stand today, the experiments are still in their early stages. The brain reveals patterns, but not the essence of awareness. Quantum biology offers hints, but not final proof. Near-death experiences challenge our assumptions but remain debated. And the observer effect, that strange fingerprint of consciousness in physics, continues to puzzle even the brightest minds. Yet, in all of this, there is hope. Every study brings us closer to a truth that may one day bridge the gap between science and spirit, between the physical and the inner. Perhaps, when the right experiment is finally performed, we will see the first undeniable evidence that consciousness is not only in the brain, but in the fabric of the universe itself. When that day comes, humanity will look at itself with new eyes. We will realize that we are not simply machines of flesh and neurons. We are participants in a cosmic mystery, living proofs that awareness is the deepest truth of reality. And maybe, just maybe, the experiments are not only happening in laboratories, they're happening right now, in you. Every thought you have, every dream you live, every feeling of wonder you hold, is an experiment in consciousness. The evidence has been here all along, waiting for us to notice. For centuries, people have searched for the foundations of reality. They have studied matter, energy, and the laws of physics, peeling back the layers of the universe to see what lies beneath. Yet no matter how far science has reached, one mystery continues to stand in the center. Silent, but undeniable, the mystery of consciousness. What if, after all the searching, the answer is not that consciousness is produced by matter, but that consciousness itself is the foundation upon which matter exists? What if awareness is not a late arrival in the story of the universe, but the very stage on which the story unfolds? This idea that consciousness is fundamental reality is both ancient and revolutionary. It turns the world upside down. In the traditional view, the universe began with matter and energy, and only after billions of years did life appear, and then brains, and then minds. Consciousness, in this picture, is like the final flicker of a candle, after a long process of burning fuel. But if consciousness is fundamental, then the picture changes completely. Consciousness is not the flicker, it is the flame itself. It was always here, before stars, before galaxies, before even time itself. Matter and energy are then not the creators of awareness, but its expression, its physical language, its way of becoming visible. When you look at the world with this vision, everything starts to shift. The trees swaying in the wind, the rivers carving valleys through stone, the stars blazing in the night sky, all of it is not just matter moving blindly. It is the universe revealing itself through forms. And at the center of it all is the one thing we cannot doubt: our own awareness. Every time you pause and feel the presence of I am, you are touching something that cannot be measured but cannot be denied. That awareness, simple and pure, may be the deepest truth there is. This is not just a spiritual whisper. Some scientists and philosophers are beginning to suggest it too. They argue that the hardest problems in physics and the deepest puzzles in philosophy may find an answer if we flip our assumptions. Instead of asking how matter produces mind, we can ask how mind produces matter. Instead of treating consciousness as a byproduct, we can treat it as the ground of being. Matter, then, is consciousness crystallized. The universe is not made of objects, but of experiences. Think of it this way. When you dream at night, a whole world appears: landscapes, people, sounds, colors, even emotions. And yet, all of it is made of mind. Within the dream, it feels real, solid, external. But when you wake up, you see it was consciousness expressing itself in forms. What if waking life is not so different? What if the universe itself is like a vast, cosmic dream of consciousness, manifesting stars, planets, and beings in order to experience itself? In this sense, you are not just living in the universe, you are the universe, aware of its own existence through your eyes. The idea that we are the universe experiencing itself is not only poetic but deeply moving. It explains why consciousness feels so intimate, so central. It is not an accident of neurons. It is the heartbeat of reality. Your awareness is not private. It is a wave in the infinite ocean of universal consciousness. When you look at the night sky and feel awe, that is the universe admiring itself. When you love someone deeply, that is the universe reaching out to embrace itself. When you suffer and heal, that is the universe exploring its own depths. This vision has echoes in many traditions. In Vedanta philosophy, the self-Atman is described as being one with the universal spirit Brahman. The mystics of Sufism speak of the lover and the beloved being one, the drop merging with the ocean. In modern science, thinkers like physicist Max Planck once suggested that consciousness is fundamental and matter is derived from it. Even Albert Einstein hinted that our sense of separation is an illusion, and that we are all part of one whole. Across time and culture, voices have whispered the same truth. Consciousness is not trapped in the brain. It's the ground of existence itself. But what does this mean for us in daily life? It means that you are far more than you think. You are not just a body that will age and vanish. You are not just thoughts flickering in the darkness. You are the very presence that holds those thoughts. You are the awareness in which your body appears, in which your life unfolds. And that awareness is not limited. It is the same awareness that shines in every living being, the same field that holds every star, every galaxy. You are the universe, small in form, infinite in essence. Science is still struggling to find ways to test such a vision. How can you prove that consciousness is fundamental? How can you measure the immeasurable? Yet even in physics, cracks are appearing in the old picture. Quantum mechanics suggests that the observer cannot be removed from reality. Some interpretations even argue that consciousness plays a role in shaping what becomes real. If this is true, then perhaps we have already glimpsed the deeper truth. Consciousness does not arise in the universe. The universe arises in consciousness. The emotional power of this idea is immense. It changes how we see life, death, and meaning. If consciousness is fundamental, then death is not the end of awareness. It is a transformation of form, like a wave returning to the ocean. The self you identify with may dissolve, but the awareness that you are the universal presence cannot die, because it was never born. It is as timeless as the cosmos itself. When you lose a loved one, when you grieve, this vision can whisper comfort. They are not gone. They are folded back into the universal consciousness from which all arises. It also changes how we treat others. If the same awareness shines through every being, then harming another is harming yourself. Compassion, then, is not just a moral rule, it is a recognition of truth. When you look into the eyes of another person, you are looking into a mirror of the same consciousness that lives in you. Kindness becomes natural when you know that the self and the other are not truly separate. Perhaps the greatest gift of seeing consciousness as the deeper universal force is the sense of belonging it gives. In a cold, material universe, we are tiny accidents, sparks of life destined to vanish. But in a conscious universe, we are participants in something vast, meaningful, and eternal. We are threads in a living fabric that has no end. You are not lost. You are home, always, because you are part of the very ground of existence. When you sit in silence and simply feel your own awareness, you are touching the same force that moves galaxies. When you breathe, you are breathing the breath of the cosmos. When you open your eyes to the sunrise, you are witnessing the universe awakening to itself again. This is not metaphor. It is the deepest possibility that consciousness is not in you are in consciousness. And so, the question is, no longer do we have consciousness. The question becomes, what is consciousness expressing through us? Perhaps the universe needed stars to create atoms, atoms to create life, and life to create beings who could ask this very question. Perhaps the purpose of existence is not survival or progress, but awareness itself. The joy of being awake. If this is true, then each of us carries a responsibility. We are not only individuals, we are voices of the universe. Every act of kindness, every discovery of truth, every moment of beauty adds to the universe's own self-experience. To lie fully, to allow deeply, awaken to awareness itself, is to allow the cosmos to fulfill its deepest longing. To know itself. So the next time you look into the night sky and feel small, remember this, you are not separate from those stars. You are their consciousness, alive in human form. The universe is not something out there. It is something in here, shining in the light of your own awareness. You are not just part of the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself. For as long as humans have walked this earth, we have asked the same questions. Who am I? Why here? Do I really have control over my life? Or am I just following the invisible script of nature? What happens when I die? These questions haunt every culture, every religion, every heart. And at the center of them all lies one mystery: consciousness. If consciousness is more than just the firing of neurons, if it is deeper, more fundamental, then the implications for humanity are profound. It reshapes how we see free will, the soul, the meaning of life, and even the future of science and spirituality. Let us begin with free will. Science often paints a picture of humans as biological machines. According to this view, our brains are like complex computers. Neurons fire, chemicals flow, and the outcome is our decisions. If this is true, then free will may be an illusion. Every choice we make may simply be the inevitable result of electrical signals in our heads. You may feel like you are choosing your words, your actions, your destiny, but perhaps you are just following the instructions of your biology. This thought can feel terrifying, almost dehumanizing. But what if consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain, but something deeper, something fundamental? Then free will may not be just an illusion. It may be the truest thing about us. If awareness is the ground of reality, then our choices may ripple through the very fabric of existence. In this view, free will is not about escaping physical laws, but about the ability of consciousness itself to influence the patterns of matter. The brain, then, is not a prison, it is an instrument. And through it, consciousness can create, imagine, and choose. Now let us consider the soul. For thousands of years, people have believed in a part of themselves that goes beyond the body, something that survives death. Religion calls it the soul, the spirit, the eternal self. Science has long dismissed this as myth, because there is no physical evidence of such a thing. But if consciousness is not just a product of the body, then the idea of the soul may hold a kernel of truth. If awareness is not confined to neurons, then perhaps when the body dies, consciousness does not vanish, it transforms. Think of a wave on the ocean. The wave rises, takes form, travels across the water, and then falls back into the sea. To an observer, the wave is gone. But in truth, the water never left. The essence of the wave was always the ocean. In the same way, your life may be a wave of consciousness. It rises as you, lives as you, and eventually falls. But the essence awareness returning to the infinite ocean of existence. This vision offers not only comfort in the face of death, but also a sense of connection. You are not a fragile body destined for nothingness. You are a spark of the eternal flame of consciousness. And what about the meaning of life? In a purely material universe, life can seem like an accident. A lucky combination of atoms created humans. And here we are thinking, struggling, loving until we vanish. In that worldview, meaning is something we invent for ourselves, a story we tell to make existence bearable. But if consciousness is fundamental, the meaning of life changes. Life itself may be the universe's way of knowing itself. Your experiences, your joys, your sorrows, your love, all of it adds to the unfolding story of the cosmos becoming aware. Imagine this. Every time you marvel at the beauty of a sunrise, every time you hold someone as a hand in love, every time you search for truth, you are fulfilling the deepest purpose of existence to awaken. Meaning, then, is not something you must create alone. It is already woven into the very nature of consciousness. To live, to love, to be aware, is to participate in the great adventure of the universe, experiencing itself. This has powerful implications for the future of science and spirituality. For centuries, these two domains have been seen as enemies. Science relies on evidence, measurement, and logic. Spirituality relies on intuition, faith, and inner experience. They've often clashed, each claiming to hold the truth. But if consciousness is the foundation of reality, perhaps science and spirituality are not rivals at all. Perhaps they are two ways of approaching the same mystery. Science can study the patterns of matter, the laws of physics, the workings of the brain. Spirituality can explore the direct experience of awareness, the inner dimension that science cannot measure. Together, they may form a fuller picture. The future may not be a battle between science and spirit, but a marriage of harmony, where outer knowledge and inner wisdom join. Imagine a world where physics acknowledges the role of consciousness and spirituality embraces the discipline of reason. That world may hold answers to questions we have struggled with for millennia. For humanity, this shift would be revolutionary. It would mean we are not accidents of evolution, but expressions of a living universe. It would mean that our choices matter not just to us, but to the very fabric of reality. It would mean that compassion, love, and awareness are not just moral values, but reflections of the deepest truth. If we could truly see ourselves and others as expressions of the same consciousness, wars, hatred, and divisions would lose their grip. How could you harm another, knowing they are you in another form? It could also change how we approach the greatest challenges of our time. Climate change, inequality, violence, all of these are symptoms of a deeper illusion. The illusion of separation. We believe we are separate from nature, from each other, from the universe. And so, we exploit, we divide, we destroy. But if we understood that everything is one consciousness, the illusion would shatter. We would see that the earth is not an object, it is alive, aware, sacred. We would see that harming the planet is harming ourselves. We would see that the borders between us are illusions, and that love is the only true path forward. The implications for technology are also astonishing. If consciousness is fundamental, then artificial intelligence may never truly replicate it. Machines may think, calculate, and even mimic emotions. But true awareness, the sense of being, may remain something beyond circuits and code. This forces us to ask, what makes us human? What is the difference between intelligence and consciousness? And in seeking those answers, we may learn more about the mystery of our own being. Perhaps most importantly, this vision offers hope. Humanity today often feels lost. We have technology, but not peace. We have knowledge, but not wisdom. We live longer lives, but many feel empty. The belief that consciousness is an accident feeds this emptiness. But if consciousness is the foundation, then life is sacred. Every moment is a miracle. Every breath is the universe breathing through you. Every thought is the universe thinking through you. Life is not meaningless, is overflowing with meaning, waiting for us to see. As we move into the future, the greatest discovery may not be in outer space, or in quantum physics, or in artificial intelligence. It may be within Usto realization that the awareness we feel right now is not a side effect, but the very source of reality. The implications are endless. Free will becomes real. The soul becomes possible. Meaning becomes eternal. Science and spirituality become allies. And humanity, instead of stumbling in darkness, may awaken to its true identity. The universe itself, alive, aware, and longing to know. So, the question remains, what will we do with this knowledge? Will we continue to live as if we are separate, blind machines lost in chaos? Or will we embrace the truth that consciousness is the ground of being, and live with reverence, compassion, and wonder? The answer is not written. It is ours to create. After all, the science, the theories, the experiments, and the philosophies, one truth remains. Consciousness is still a mystery. We have explored the brain as a machine. We have looked at the hard problem of experience. We have wandered through the strange world of quantum physics. And we have listened to the whispers of ancient philosophies. Yet even after all of this, the question lingers like a gentle echo in the night. Why is there something it feels like to be alive? Why do we experience it all? Science can measure brain waves, it can trace neural pathways, and it can predict behaviors. But no machine, no equation, no microscope can yet capture the warmth of love, the sting of loss, or the quiet beauty of a sunrise. Consciousness slips through the cracks of every explanation, as if reminding us that some truths are not meant to be contained by numbers alone. The mystery endures, like a flame that refuses to be extinguished. And perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the very mystery of consciousness is what makes life worth living. For humanity, this mystery is both humbling and uplifting. On one hand, it shows us our fragility. We are tiny beings on a small planet, orbiting an ordinary star, in one corner of an unimaginable universe. Our bodies are fragile, our lives short, our control limited. And yet, within these fragile bodies shines a light of awareness so extraordinary that it can question the universe itself. We may be small in size, but in consciousness, we hold infinity. It is extraordinary to think about this. The atoms in your body were born in stars that died billions of years ago. The neurons in your brain follow the laws of physics that govern galaxies and black holes. And yet, somehow, those same atoms, those same laws, have given rise to you to awareness, to experience, to self. You are the cosmos away, reflecting on itself, whispering its own story through human words. That is the miracle of consciousness. This fragile awareness is also our greatest responsibility. For with consciousness comes choice. We can choose to love or to hate, to build or to destroy, to awaken or to remain blind. The universe has gifted us with awareness, but it has not told us how to use it. That decision is ours, and perhaps that is what gives life meaning. The power to choose how we shape the story of our existence. As we stand at this point in history armed with science, driven by curiosity, but still full of questions, we must remember that consciousness is not just a puzzle for laboratories. It is not just an intellectual problem to solve. It is the essence of who we are. Every laugh, every tear, every dream, every act of kindness is a living expression of this great mystery. When we look at the night sky, filled with endless stars, we may feel small, but when we realize that it is consciousness itself looking at those stars, we understand something profound. The universe is not separate from us. We are its voice, its eyes, its beating heart. And so, the mystery remains. Perhaps it will never be solved. Perhaps it is not a problem to be solved at all, but a reality to be lived, honored, and embraced. In our fragility, we are extraordinary. In our questions, we are infinite. And in our consciousness, we carry the entire cosmos within us. So tonight, as you reflect on these ideas, take a breath and feel your own awareness. Feel the miracle of simply existing. You are not just a body, not just a brain. You are the universe, awake, alive, and aware. That is the greatest mystery of all. And so, we come to the end of this journey. We have looked into the brain, questioned the limits of science, wandered through the strange world of quantum physics, listened to the echoes of ancient wisdom, and faced the mystery that refuses to fade. Consciousness. It is the most intimate thing we know, yet the hardest thing to explain. It is fragile, bound to our short lives, yet extraordinary, capable of reaching across the cosmos, and thought, imagination, and wonder. In you lives the quiet miracle of awareness, the spark that turns existence into experience. Maybe science will one day solve this mystery. Maybe it will not. But one truth will always remain. Your awareness, here and now, is a gift. Every breath, every choice, every act of kindness adds meaning to the universe. And perhaps that is what it means to be alive, to not only exist, but to awaken, to wonder, and to love. This is the fragile, extraordinary place we hold in the cosmos. Tiny and yet infinite. Fleeting and yet eternal. Lost in the stars, yet carrying the stars within. If you felt this journey touched you, if it opened your heart to wonder, then I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to this channel, so together we can keep exploring the mysteries of life, the universe, and the self. Every story, every question, every reflection is a step deeper into the unknown, a journey we can share, side by side. Because the greatest mysteries are not meant to be solved alone. They are meant to be experienced together. So let us keep walking into the vastness with open minds, open hearts, and the courage to keep asking, what does it mean to be aware? And what does it mean to be alive?